Hello, everybody. I want to go back to December 27th, 2022, in a statement from the WWE Board of Directors. Although we welcome your participation in the launch of a strategic alternatives review process, it is also our unanimous view that your return to the company at this time, while government investigations into your conduct by the U.S. Attorney's Office and SEC are still pending and would not be prudent from a shareholder value perspective. This determination is based on a variety of factors, including non-public information the board has become aware of and the risks to the company and its shareholders of placing a greater spotlight on these issues. Welcome to the August 2nd edition of Pollock and Thurston, a very crazy day in the world of professional wrestling. And one of those days, Brandon, where pro wrestling does manage to reach out to the casual fans out there, because I see nonstop WWE headlines today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? This is clearly what W needs to do to reach out to the casual fans more often.
This is it. This is it.
To break more news in 10Q filings with the Securities and Exchanges Commission.
That's the answer to all these questions. And how interesting that as the WWE returns to Ford Field this coming Saturday, the last event in that stadium, the Battle of the Billionaires, and this week, the two key draws to that WrestleMania, the Battle of the Billionaires, celebrating in grand jury fashion this week. What a return to Ford Field for this big 16-year return in Detroit.
Yes, I have a feeling Donald and Vince will not be meeting once again, though. This coming weekend.
Don't see highlights of that maybe being part of the opening? Maybe Kid Rock will voice an open referring to two of his heroes?
Yeah, I think they'll avoid that.
Well, we are going to be diving into a lot of things. I thought, this week, no guest. We're going to be mainly concentrating on the Q2 earnings. I think like the Q2 actual report is at least third down the list for us today, because correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, when typically is the 10Q released in relation to the earnings report?
So it varies. It could be as late as the following day.
Yeah.
But I was going to check just, even before you brought it up, I wanted to see what the timing was when the alert email came out for the 10Q. And I am looking at it now. It was, let's see here, 7:31 a.m. is when that came out, apparently. So that was well before the call. That was an hour before the call, in fact.
Correct. Yeah. So this was one where, this is buried in this 160 some odd page 10Q filing that goes into a lot of the specifics of, a lot of their aspects of business. But what jumps out here is on July 17th, 2023, federal law enforcement agents executed a search warrant and served a federal grand jury subpoena on Mr. McMahon. No charges have been brought in these investigations. The company has received voluntary and compulsory legal demands for documents, including from federal law enforcement and regulatory agencies concerning the investigation and related subject matters. And having just watched the Dark Side of the Ring episode where names were disputed, I am sure Vince Russo was reading this and stating, listen, they're subpoenaing Mr. McMahon. Vince McMahon is completely fine.
Yes. We'll talk about that next week, I think.
Next week. We cannot cover Bash at the Beach on today's show. There's just too much.
So I'm looking at it, and there's 3 paragraphs that we're concerned with here. And 2 of those paragraphs, the one before and the one after the one in the middle, those are not new paragraphs, I think. This discussion about the special committee of the board of directors that investigated the allegations of misconduct, yada, yada. And then the one at the bottom, the company received voluntary and compulsory legal demands for documents, including the federal law enforcement and regulatory agencies, yada, yada. I think this is stuff that's been out there for almost a year, if not more than a year now. But it's the paragraph in between about law enforcement agents executing a search warrant and serving a federal grand jury subpoena on Mr. McMahon. That's the new information there. But I think all 3 of those, you can only guess sometimes with these SEC filings and how abstruse they are. But I think those 3 things are all related. I think this is concerning the payments, the NDA payments that Vince made to keep various women silent, following allegations of sexual misconduct, and the payments to Donald Trump and that he made to the Trump Foundation exchanged for Trump's performance fees, performances in 2007 and 2009. Those benefited the company. They should have been recorded as company expenses. They were not. That's the big issue here. That's really motivating. That put everything in motion last year. And yeah, so I think that's what's happening here. I don't think this is some new story, completely removed from the investigation of last year.
Correct. Yeah. So as well, as this had been filed in the 10Q filing, there was an email sent out to members of the company, and this statement was also issued to CNBC. I'm sure some other media outlets got it as well, and this includes a statement from Vince McMahon regarding this latest news.
Did you get it? Did you get the press release sent to you?
No, I got someone in WWE who said,
same.
Have you got the Vince McMahon news? And I was like, which piece of Vince McMahon news? Because there's been multiples this morning. No, I don't think I'm on the internal emailing list. But if anyone wants to add me, you are more than welcome to, as you are with Brandon. Maybe we'll ask about that this weekend. But Vince McMahon wrote or issued the statement in 2022, WWE formed a special committee to review allegations of misconduct against me. That review was concluded in November of 2022 following an extensive investigation. Throughout this experience, I have always denied any intentional wrongdoing and continue to do so. I'm confident that the government's investigation will be resolved without any findings or wrongdoing. I am focused on completing the recovery process from my recent spinal surgery and on closing our transaction with Endeavor, which will create one of the preeminent global sports and entertainment brands. Nothing regarding a potential option on this story for a future Blumhouse dramatic series that could be in development. Vince McMahon versus the grand jury. But yes, no denies any intentional wrongdoing. There may have been some wrongdoing, but it was not intentional.
Yeah. How many lawyers and PR people do you think looked this over before they said go with it?
Not named Jerry McDivitt.
So I mean, the implication here is that Vince didn't realize what he was that he always denied any intentional wrongdoing. He didn't think there was anything wrong with paying off women and having them sign NDAs for alleged sexual misconduct. And maybe this speaks more to Vince's moral standards. But in any case,
yeah, and then keeping it separate from company funds and other allegations that have come out. I mean, just what's the issue? What could be wrong with all this?
And WWE made a comment too as part of this internal message. Do you have that?
Can you read that?
I have it. WWE, their comment was, "We believe this is a continuation of the investigation that commenced last summer. WWE has cooperated throughout and fully understands and respects the government's need for a complete process." Sounds similar to what Nick Khan said on the call itself, where he said that they're going to cooperate, but they're not going to comment right now on any legal matter.
No. And I mean, at this point, like this was issued, as Brandon said, at about 7:30 this morning. I'm imagining most people were first finding out about this when one of the analysts on the call brought this up to Nick Khan and suddenly it is referring to the July 17th subpoena. And I think a collective control F on July 17th was being typed in furiously on people's computers, and then realizing this thing like way down there in this 10Q filing, which, I mean, had they released this 10Q 12 hours from now, I mean, this would have been, I mean, to their credit, they got this 10Q out and it was at least brought up on the call. Not that you were going to get any substantive answer, but nonetheless, I'm like, this to me overwhelmed any news coming out of this. The fact that Vince McMahon is on medical leave, I thought that was going to be the major takeaway from this call, confirming the recent spinal surgery that he had about 2 weeks ago and is going to be on medical leave for an indefinite period of time. And the fact as well, you look at this, and not to say one is connected with the other, but this subpoena was issued July 17th. And I believe the date they noted of the surgery was July the 20th or 21st. So this is happening within a several day period.
Right. It reminds me of the steroid trial where I guess Vince had neck surgery. Is that right? During the trial. So he just happened to be appearing in the courtroom with the neck brace and all that.
And Jerry McDivitt on Dark Side of the Ring stating how they celebrated the acquittal, and there's the reenactment of Vince McMahon taking off the neck brace and throwing it up into the air. Not to say there's anything connected with this, but people are naturally going to go to that.
I mean, I don't doubt that Vince at his age and the bumps and the weightlifting that he's gone through in his life.
Oh, no doubt.
I
No
don't doubt
doubt.
that he needs surgery that he is reported to have had.
I would be curious if this surgery that he needed is something that he's known he's needed
Right.
for a long period of time versus, he just suffered a nerve issue like lifting, like this came out of the blue a month ago or something like that. You would think, given his regimen, that this is probably just, decades and decades of damage he has done to his back. But yeah, it does theoretically like take Vince McMahon outside of whatever his day-to-day duties were, and comes at the time as this merger is still going through, and it just is kind of puts the spotlight right back on Vince McMahon and this return to the company that was unanimously voted against by the board of directors before Vince McMahon pretty much elbowed his way back into power in the company. And you can argue from the business sense that had Vince McMahon not been in this position, is this sale to Endeavor, does it happen? And certainly you could look, it would not be as lucrative given Ari Emanuel's desire to have Vince McMahon part of this and even upping his percentage in this TKO Holdings company as well. Like, you can debate certainly Vince McMahon's involvement here, but this is sort of playing out like here is the latest chapter of this story that is not seen its finality yet.
Yeah, I mean, he was asked in the CNBC interview the morning that they announced the deal. He was asked whether, if not for the scandal, would this deal still have happened? And he said, "Oh yeah, definitely. I still would have explored strategic alternatives and all that." I find that dubious. That he needed. I believe that he needed to. It certainly helped to, when he forced his way back into the company, to say, "Well, I'm coming back to help. Make a merger or acquisition transaction." So what do we believe about what he's been doing day to day? At least on the creative side, we have reports that he's involved remotely for the most part. He's only been at TV a couple times, but he's apparently making changes and participating in some way in creative remotely. He's recovering now. The legend with Vince McMahon is you're never sick. There's no such thing as sick. So I'm surprised that he would actually withdraw from work if that's what's really going to happen.
In theory, he can't work and he can't work out at the moment. What is he doing all day? As there's a grand jury investigation going on for him. What a week.
Yeah, maybe he'll read some books. Maybe he'll catch up on Succession. Who knows?
Get a tablet. I'm certain there's lots of options for him. The Bear is out, season 2. Great television to watch. But nonetheless, it was amazing to me just how this news, like, to me, it just usurped what was a pretty spectacular quarter. I mean, you can look at like certain areas being down, mainly their consumer products, but overall, this reflected a company that is on a huge popularity boom, and the live attendance, the television numbers are just stunning when you compare the state of cable and where it's at. And as WWE is continuing into their negotiations, which were another big subject on the media call as well, but it seemed like most of the coverage is all on Vince McMahon and not so much the company's very successful quarter that continues a very successful year that will be another record-setting one.
Yeah, I mean, the earnings calls, most of the information that comes out of the earnings reports and the calls are of interest to people who might want to listen to Wrestlenomics or of interest. There's tidbits that wrestling news media in general will cover, but this subpoena Vince McMahon, who's a well-known celebrity throughout the world, that's a much bigger story. But I thought it was interesting that, I mean, look, the attendance is doing really well. Attendance is up by, I think, 40 or 50% from the prior period. TV ratings are doing really well, especially in the demo. That's really happening. Why is that happening? Because content has improved. Who's in charge of the content? Triple H. How many words did he say on this call? None. He was there, though. He was introduced. He's present on the call along with CEO Nick Khan and CFO Frank Riddick, but no, not even opening remarks. Prepared remarks were only from Nick and Frank, and they handled all the Q&A as well.
Yeah, it was very much Paul Levesque in an even more subdued role than Vince McMahon used to be on these calls, where you wouldn't have even known that Paul Levesque was part of this call at all. But it was interesting to hear that as much as they are on this gigantic, I don't think there was one one name drop of any one performer or anything
No,
like
I don't
that.
think
It
so.
was very much the WWE, we, and not assigning like even specific episodes, like the June 2nd SmackDown. That was one of the big ones of this quarter, which was the 1,000-day celebration for Roman Reigns. It's just very interesting the fact that it was not so much crediting it to the creative or any of these characters that have caught fire or this long-term storytelling, all stuff that when it was the other side of the coin and they were being criticized over, and why can't you create new stars and such, now they're doing it and not so much assigning um any of that praise onto the creative side and the characters that are involved in it.
Yeah, I mean, when things are going well, it's always because of something that you're doing internally, and when things are not going well, it's because of external things that are basically out of your control. But I think SmackDown especially has really excelled, particularly in this quarter. But Raw's been up to, and NXT has really uh, seen a surge in ratings of late with the addition of some main roster talent, guest appearances. But I think there's a lot of praise to give towards their ticket sales performance and their TV ratings performance, and I think you have to put that largely on the content and the talent that's involved in that.
Let's look at some of the figures coming out of this. So for the quarter, this was their largest quarter for revenue ever at $410.3 million, up 25% from the same quarter last year. And these are both Mania quarters, last year and this year in the second quarter. Adjusted OIBDA of $49.2 million this quarter, and that translates to a net income of $52 million. So while revenue grew 25%, their net income, like they're still spending a ton of money, and a lot of it, you looked at their headquarters is now $30 million above the original projections, and as well, consumer products were down that they cited for the switch over to the Fanatics deal. That was one area that was down, but as much revenue as they are bringing in, they are spending a lot of money too.
Well, the net income in particular, net income is the final measure of profit. That's after taxes is taken out, and they paid an effective tax rate of 38% this quarter, which is a lot more than usual. They usually pay something more like 28%. So I don't know what's behind that, but they paid a lot more in tax than they usually do.
We also had the live event sector, which, I mean, for years and years, we were talking about how dismal this was becoming. And as Brandon mentioned, like they had a 51% jump in revenue in live events, averaging about 7,300 for the quarter if you factor out WrestleMania, and taking in $40.3 million in North American revenue. And then they ran 10 international events as well. And a cool $93.59 for a WWE ticket in North America per event.
Yes. Yeah. So we were also able to do some math on WrestleMania, and we know that WrestleMania did basically what Polestar had indicated that WrestleMania did do. Because they give us quarterly averages for the North American attendance, and because WrestleMania is such a big event and has such a high attendance, it really skews things. So each year they break out, here's the average with WrestleMania and here's the average without WrestleMania. The numbers are rounded to the nearest 100, so we have to do some math, and we get a range. And the range this year, if I can find it, is 100. I'll round here to 122,000 tickets at the low end to as much as 130. Let's call it 131 tickets sold. So I believe they're showing paid attendances here. They're not including comps here on the investor site. So anyway, that comes out to in the middle about 126,000, and Polestar had it at 127,531, which is 63 the first night, 64 the second night. So that's what they published here is consistent with what Polestar had. Polestar is probably getting it from an actual ticket audit, like the gate receipts. So it is what you would think it would be based on those Polestar numbers.
But wait a minute, I tuned into WrestleMania, and that's not the number they gave me on the broadcast. Mm-hmm. It was a rounding error, right? Where they 161,892.
It includes ticket takers and ushers and all of the talent and every person there, all of those people, maybe even some empty suites or something like that. But yeah,
so plenty of people going back now and correcting those attendance figures that came out that particular week.
If you look this stuff on places like Wikipedia, and they take the announced number at face value.
Are you ready for the great attendance debate that is going to be taking off any day now as
I'm prepared.
as All In starts to hit 80,000?
I've briefed everyone on Twitter yesterday. So.
Are you ready to have to announce or explain to people what a turnstile count is?
So WrestleMania 32 is going to be
why are the Arlington police involved in this, Brandon? Tell me all
They're
this.
very involved. They're very involved. So you want to talk about this now? So WrestleMania 32, which was announced famously as 101,000. Is it on here? 101,763 was the announced attendance for that 2016 WrestleMania. The one was that's the one main event by Roman Reigns and an Undertaker who's staggering around the ring, barely able to bump and feed.
This was Reigns and Hunter in the.
You're right. That's right. I'm sorry. That's right. That was the following year, I think, or maybe even 18. Anyway, that's right. Okay, and this is the Shane McMahon jumping off the cell. So anyway, that was the big one that they're pushing to be 100,000, and that's what they announced. I asked a year later, just thinking about it, I was like, why don't I try to email some people? I think I emailed the stadium and they sort of directed me to the police, or maybe they directed me to the fire department. Anyway, I finally emailed the Arlington Police Department, and someone from communications with the police department got back to me and said the announced attendance was this, 101,000, and the turnstile count was 80,709. I finally have that number memorized. And that, I believe, means the scan count. Does that include suites? I don't know. I believe I did follow up like a year after the fact and asked them, does it include the suites? And they didn't know. So 80,000 is the number of people whose tickets were counted or scanned. I don't think this means that you had to have a paper ticket. I know a lot of people don't have paper tickets, probably not even going back to 2016. I imagine there was probably electronic tickets happening. And I've had people tell me, well, there was a big problem with getting people in the building on that day. And a lot of people got in without having their tickets scanned. So there's all this ambiguity you can throw on it. But if you look at the paid attendance that's implied by the ranges that we just talked about, they put out this key performance indicator document. Every quarter they update it. You can still find the links that show the 2016 numbers, and the number falls somewhere about 5%, give or take, of 79,800. Remember, the Arlington Police said 80,709, and that's very close relatively to 79,800. Number of people in the building doesn't mean that everybody in the building paid, obviously, but I think you get, you have comps and then you have no shows. So I think there's a little bit of offsetting factor there. So roughly 80,000 people in the building. Does that include suites? I don't know. But would that show up as paid? Or maybe the suites have people who have suite access have a deal where they're just as part of their season tickets with the Cowboys or something. I'm not sure.
I would imagine the vast majority of people listening or watching to this kind of understand how this works and the key performance indicators that always show this. But whenever sort of an attendance figure,
key performance indicators are listening right now. I love
it reaches out in the ether. I mean, you even pointed it out today. Like Vince McMahon has literally stated this outright, referring to WrestleMania 32 and the facade of the quote unquote entertainment number versus what they actually put out.
He just volunteered that out of nowhere at the beginning of a call, a couple quarters after WrestleMania 32, which makes me think that there were questions or something that IR was getting as a result of this, because he just brought it up out of nowhere. By the way, that wasn't a paid number, that 101,000. It wasn't paid. It included ushers and ticket takers and all of that, I believe were his words verbatim.
All people that would be a measure of your popularity of an event. Sure. How many ushers were part of this event?
Sure.
So maybe if the man gets deposed, they will sneak in a question. How many people attended WrestleMania 3?
I hope so.
But maybe we can chat about that with Bix next week. We will. We're just going to throw the gauntlet at Bix and Span next week.
We'll get him to talk about WrestleMania 3. But the big problem is, All In is getting really close to 80,000 tickets distributed according to WrestleTix. So, as I said, there wasn't an AEW angle to the WrestleMania attendance controversy, but now there is.
Yeah, it would seem almost impossible that they don't hit that 80 figure at this point, as they are still without any matches announced as we go into Dynamite tonight. Other things on the call, they have maintained their guidance for the third quarter and for the year, expecting adjusted OIBDA of $395 to $410 million. So despite over delivering in this quarter, still sticking with their regular guidance. And we went to the earnings call, and some of the key topics brought up beyond the Vince McMahon subpoena that Nick Khan just stated they will be cooperative with, but are not going to comment on. We had a former guest on the show, Brandon Ross, asking about why the deals, the new domestic rights deals, have gone at a much slower pace than previously. If you remember, the last set of deals were announced in the spring of 2018, which was a full year and a half before they expired. And Nick Khan stated that the starting prices this time around are much higher than they were last time, and they can't control the timing. And the fact is, it's a strong landscape for, quote, products that register. And there's interest from digital and traditional buyers for Raw, SmackDown, and NXT. And to state that if it's a traditional buyer, i.e. a broadcast cable outlet, that you should expect a digital presence to go with it. And if it's a digital buyer, like an Apple or an Amazon, you probably would not have that traditional presence, which obviously makes sense. But yes, the waiting game is still on. And yeah, there was not much to report on the domestic rights deals, other than it painted a really great picture if you're looking at the overall performance of Raw and SmackDown.
Yeah, what he said about, he talks a lot about the NFL too, and look at how the NFL works. So if you think about how a lot of sports, I guess with the exception of the NBA and with the exception of WWE and AEW for that matter, you think about how they're distributed on television and if they are on streaming, a lot of those, certainly the NFL, but maybe we don't want to look at the NFL because it's such a, it lives is so alone in its own world, you know, on its high peak. But if you think about how the NHL is distributed, there's NHL on TNT, traditional TV, and there's an NHL with ESPN, but ESPN, it's largely on ESPN Plus, somewhat on the ESPN linear channel. If you look at Major League Baseball, there's a lot of Major League Baseball on traditional TV, on ESPN, on TBS, on Fox, and there's a lot of baseball on, I'm just rolling through it in my head, on Peacock, on Apple TV. I don't know if there's any other streamers with baseball. In any case, a lot of these sports are on streaming as well as traditional TV. And in the case of the NFL, you can watch the CBS games on Paramount Plus. A lot of the NFL games on NBC are on Peacock. So I think in the next term, say it's 5 years, that's what these deals have been in the last couple cycles. If it's a 5-year deal, part way through that 5-year deal, I don't know that cable is going to be in half the U.S. homes. There's about 120 million TV homes in the United States. There were numbers that just, that John Oran was putting out of Sports Business Journal the other day, showing, this is what the big channels are in, and they're in like the low 70 millions.
70. So, he was explaining that August 1st, they've lost. There's 3.1 million subscribers that have dropped cable since the beginning of the year. 3.1 million. And also adding the fact that technically FS1 is now in more homes than ESPN, even though ESPN is a more profitable channel based on what they get per subscriber. But that's stunning to me that FS1 is actually in more homes than ESPN now.
But like, what's the difference? I consider those differences.
I mean, it's probably marginal, but it does show you like the erosion of ESPN that a decade ago was in over 100 million homes.
Right. And in the course of this 5-year deal, I think those channels are going to end up being in less than half of the homes. They are in half of the homes now, right? 70 plus, times 2 is 140. So that's more than half the U.S. TV homes. But as time goes on here and cord cutting continues to happen, and ESPN and USA Network and Fox even are in fewer and fewer homes, you're going to have a diminishing reach over the course of that deal. So wouldn't you want those Raw and SmackDown? I know you're on Peacock and that's in more homes, but that's once a month. That's great, but that's only once a month. Isn't it important to have Raw and SmackDown to reach as many people as possible so that you can sustain the popularity of your brand and sell tickets and things like that? Which raises the question about Fox. He said if it's a traditional player, it'll have a streaming component to it. What's Fox going to do? Fox doesn't really play in streaming except for Tubi, but I don't see Tubi is not cannibalizing, if you will, Fox content. Like, we don't see the Fox NFL games on Tubi or I think any streaming platform. Fox has been, pretty strategic about, letting everybody else kill themselves with streaming, and they're going to stick to traditional TV. And I think probably end up being a component in consolidation later. So I don't know what happens if Fox renews SmackDown. I don't know where the streaming is going to come from. I've sort of theorized maybe there's some sort of agreement that they can make with Amazon Prime Video, and there could be some sort of simulcast worked out. I don't know though. There's discussion here too about the NBA. And whether or not, are you just waiting for, do the networks just want to get the NBA deals done, which are going to be far more expensive, right? And the content is a lot more popular and valuable. So are we just waiting for the NBA deals to be done so that the networks can be comfortable with their scheduling and with their finances to decide what they're going to do with you? And Nick Khan said emphatically no. This is what he said in the past, that they think they're their own thing, that they have their own value, and it'll be fine. It would explain why NBCU has not renewed yet. I think we all expect that NBCU is going to renew Raw. Hasn't yet, and they're out of the exclusive negotiating window. And NBC is probably interested and probably is going to bid on NBA content. WBD might bid on less content, so there might be some for the NBC to pick up without the NBA even having to create new windows or whatever.
Which would also extend, like, if, as it's been noted, if NBC were to get even a portion of the NBA package, it wouldn't just be NBC. Like, a lot of those games would probably trickle down to the USA Network as well. There'd probably be a Peacock component in there. I'm curious as well of your thoughts on what kind of a role, if any, NBC could play as an outlet for a SmackDown, or in certain cases, a simulcast of Raw for certain big episodes, or just some component that there's a broadcast add-on in these new deals that you're seeing. I mean, it's almost, it used to be very rare you would see UFC on ABC, and now, like, the prelims, they are almost always now they're on ESPN, they're on ESPN Plus, and they throw them up on ABC.
Yeah, give it the widest reach possible. The Super Bowl is going to be on Nickelodeon this year, I believe. That was a news item recently.
Oh, huge.
So yeah, and this is something that Nick talked about, I believe, at the Moffat-Nathanson conference, about the possibility of maybe at least select episodes of Raw being simulcast on NBC, which is what we've seen with a lot of different content. I think a lot of college basketball was doing this. The All-Star game was on multiple channels. There's other stuff that this has been done with too, just to give it the widest reach possible, I guess. And I could see it happening on select occasions. I find it hard to imagine WWE having a regular home on NBC broadcast. I don't know about SmackDown. I'd have to look at TV schedules to see, like, what does everybody have on Friday. But SmackDown could be on any night, I suppose.
We can move to any night. We have an audience that moves without any resistance. That's been a big selling feature for SmackDown.
The point with NBC, like, we know what the ESPN airs NBA, not NBC, the NBA with we know TNT is airing NBA during the season Tuesday, Thursday, right? And is ESPN doing Monday, Wednesday? So, I mean, what's likely to happen here? Maybe TNT gives up some of their games or one of their entire nights or something like that. I guess that would open up Tuesday and Thursday. You would still have Monday open on the if it's all going to be on USA, let's say, I don't know. You'd still have Monday open. And I would think that would be your preference, is to have let your really popular WWE Raw content win on Monday, which it is right now. It's been number one on multiple weeks lately overall. So win on cable on Monday, and then have the NBA on some other nights. So I would have to think, though, if you're NBCU, maybe you're open to shifting things around. And Nick has even said that he's not opposed to moving Raw away from Monday. Hard to imagine that after since 1993, though.
Yeah, so he also, once again, voiced his support for the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild, and happy to hear that talks are resuming this Friday. They're very happy for them, and adding that in, maybe Nick Khan and Seth Rollins, they're rooting for the actors.
Sure, absolutely. Writers. With their words, they are. Yes.
If I was on this call, my follow-up would have been, why? Why are you supporting? Seriously, like, from a pure economic standpoint, would it not favor WWE that these unions are at odds with the studios for months and months to come? Doesn't that absolutely up your value in the short term?
They're rooting for them because they want to have good relationships with people. I think it would be the most realistic answer. I don't know if they would say that, but but I think definitely the more
here in WWE, we love unions. We are pro-union.
Well, I don't go that far. But the longer that this goes on, and the more every other form of content or scripted content is affected. I mean, that's makes WWE more valuable.
It was also brought up the fact that despite the investigation into Vince McMahon ending last November, there are still expenses that have been incurred that have bled into this year, with $7.1 million paid out throughout the first 6 months of the year, and that Vince McMahon has agreed to review and reimburse the company for all reasonable costs incurred, and thus far has paid $17.4 million towards this investigation. That I would love to know what the grand total of this investigation is by the end, that the millions and millions that have been put into this investigation.
Yeah, I was slightly surprised to find out that they were still incurring costs from that. There was disclosure too in the 10Q about the payments that they're still making, which are, I guess, periodic installment payments that they're making towards the NDAs themselves.
So that continues that. Do you want to speak at all about your understanding of like the Fanatics deal and how this impacts their consumer products division? Like this was one area that was down this particular year, and Curry Baker did bring this up on the call as well.
I don't have a lot to say about it, just other than, we know that Fanatics is basically taking care of their e-commerce business, which is something that used to be in-house for them. There's less revenue now because of that. I imagine because WWE is now getting a license, some sort of licensing compensation from Fanatics, who's selling the merchandise themselves, and is also taking a lot of the cost, I would think.
Let's move on to a couple of other topics, because there's quite a lot that is going on. The Elite have re-signed with AEW. And that includes Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, and Hangman Page. And I guess AEW, they figured, man, we're gonna own the news cycle on Wednesday with this announcement. And it went out. There was a story up on SI.com from Justin Barrasso with comments from Tony Khan. And we know that Barry Bloom had been representing Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. I don't know if he represents Hangman Page in these negotiations, but they presented them here as a collective re-signing, multi-year deals that they did not specify the length of. And I would think that most were kind of hedging their bets that these four would stay, but they were very interesting pieces given what they would mean by shaking things up and what this would have meant to AEW to lose, I would say, any of these performers, much less all four of them. But we did have the Boston promo a few weeks ago with Kenny Omega alluding to the fact, wherever we go, we will be sticking together. And given the ages of Kenny Omega and even the Young Bucks, certainly you wonder if this was the last opportunity they would have to go for a sustained WWE run, if that was something they're looking at. Like Kenny Omega, he's 39, so you peg him into his early 40s by the time this deal is up. Not necessarily that he would be done by that point, but I think it certainly lessens, like if there was a time, if he really wanted to explore a WWE run, this seemed to be the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it's the name of the company is All Elite Wrestling. And it was named that because of the Elite, which was a brand that they sort of made as a spinoff away from the Bullet Club at the time. But it would be a shot to your brand if you lost the people whose brand was, the company was literally built on. So
do you think some of that was lost when Cody left, in hindsight, that there was a piece of the company that people associated, like here was
one of the EVPs. Yeah,
you lost one of the EVPs, and I think at the time it was this idea that, well, look, it's such a deep roster, and it's going to be. It's not like we saw the immediate effects, but we certainly did with his move to WWE. And I think now that you look back, to me, it was a real sizable one, and we'll never know what it would mean if these four left, like that certain kind of heartbeat of the company that they represent.
Yeah, I think there's tremendous defensive value in that for WWE to take Cody away, and if it were to happen, it's apparently not going to happen now. But if they were to take any of those, particularly the Bucks and Kenny, maybe somewhat Page too. But when I think of the Elite, I think of Kenny and the Bucks especially. But yeah, and not just to sign them away, to sort of diminish the brand value of AEW, but then to actually do well with Cody, and Cody's become a really successful star for them, which is a huge, benefit to them, to not only have a star who's, helping them generate economics, but also to show people that, if we sign someone from AEW, if you're in AEW right now and you're thinking about, going elsewhere, if you come to WWE, they might make you one of the top stars in the world.
Yeah, I think this was it was a big signing for AEW. Like it clears up like that big question mark through that would be kind of hovering over them throughout the rest of the year of what the status would be of the elite, and they get them all locked up for several years. Like that's a great re-signing for them from just a public relations standpoint as well on all of that.
And whatever is going on between them and Punk is apparently not enough of an issue to keep them from re-signing.
Yeah, which I mean is, to me at the very least, it opens the door that you would think that in these negotiations, like what is our, like, is this just going to be business as usual and we're going to continue on sort of let's kind of equal footing on
when is the match happening? Was that in the contract?
Well, maybe that was on page 140 of the AEW 10Q filing of when it would be coming back. There is a rumor, I'm hoping you can confirm, Brandon. There is an event taking place on August 27th at Wembley Stadium that AEW is promoting. No matches that we can talk about yet, but it is scheduled to be on pay-per-view per the reporting of several, including yourself, Brandon. What have you found out about where people can watch this event on August 27th?
At least in the US. And it'll be available internationally too on ppv.com, which you may be more familiar with. This is a digital pay-per-view carrier, which is owned by In Demand. But anyway, this is going to be on DirecTV. It's going to be on In Demand. So those are probably the two biggest pay-per-view carriers. I think In Demand provides pay-per-view for I want to say the vast majority of US cable. And DirecTV is the biggest satellite provider. Pretty sure they're bigger than Dish. So this is going to be on.
What's as a naive Canadian, what was the relationship of like Comcast and In Demand? Is one servicing the other? Like I just don't know how that works.
I believe Comcast, Charter, and another big cable operator co-own In Demand.
Okay.
So if it's on In Demand, it's going to be on all of those carriers as well. Basically, if you're on In Demand, you're on pay-per-view, I think is right. Sort of, shorthand. So it's going to be on pay-per-view. Does that mean it's only going to be on pay-per-view, exclusively on pay-per-view? Probably, but who knows? It could, that we can't completely rule out that it won't be, somewhere else, because we know, WWE is going to be on pay-per-view on DirecTV. This when I asked DirecTV, they did let me know that SummerSlam would also be available on DirecTV. So still on pay-per-view, W premium live events. But
if they were to come out and announce this is going to stream live on Max on August 27th, do you think there would be a percentage of fans greater, let's say, than 10% that would be very nervous about streaming this on Max when Max does not have a history of live sports? That there would be, at least much like that first WrestleMania on the WWE network, where they still did like a large amount of buys because of people's lack of confidence that, man, I don't want to have streaming problems for this big show, and I'm just going to buy it on pay-per-view.
Yeah, I think you would still have a lot of people ordering it through pay-per-view, either because they just, don't want to go through whatever they would have to go through just to set up Max, and maybe they don't have the streaming devices set up to make it happen, or whatever. But I don't think that's going to happen. I would be surprised if by the time Dynamite is over that we don't know that this is going to be, if it's not messaged clearly enough, that this is going to be a pay-per-view, an exclusive pay-per-view. I think there's reports or speculation out there, right, that we expect matches to be announced tonight as well. But I imagine it comes down to, among other things, perhaps that Max, when they made the change to become not just HBO Max, but to become Max, that they're no longer, even though they did do live telecasts, I believe earlier this year on HBO Max, the infrastructure has changed and they're not yet ready to do a live broadcast. Do you think it's an issue at all for this to be so unclear still up to this moment?
The matches or the broadcast information?
The broadcast itself.
Not really. I think it's ideal. Like, you want to get this kind of stuff out there. Ultimately, it's people are deciding on this the week of, and it's going to be baked into their heads that I'm going to have all the usual outlets to watch this on, and provided they're on those normal outlets, I don't foresee it having any grand impact on people. But it is a little, obviously there's something behind this of why this has been delayed for so long, that you can't just get this out there. It's hard to believe that this was the day one plan. If it was just like, why would this information be held out till just a few weeks before the pay-per-view.
And I'm sure the vast majority of purchases are made in the final hours before the show actually goes live. My only concern would be that, I did get a lot of response, for whatever it's worth, of people saying, why do reporters have to figure this out? And AEW hasn't made an announcement themselves. And it's just another anecdote for some fans. I don't know if it's a critical mass of fans, but some fans to say, where's the communication from AEW with their fans? Which is becoming a bit of a pattern when it comes to other things like that. There's this cone of secrecy sometimes around AEW that I just can't figure out.
Listen, there's certain things that the company is not going to be able to beat reporters to. This is one, no offense, but this is one like they should have been on. Like it shouldn't have been yourself or a Dave Meltzer being the first ones to get this information out. Like this is stuff that to me is controllable in your own sphere. I would say in terms of impacting your fans, I'm not accounting for people that maybe have heard this announcement and might have just assumed maybe this is going to be a free special. Maybe there's some way I'm going to watch this. And now I'm hearing that this is going to be a pay-per-view on top of asking me for the same amount the next week if there's no like kind of bundled option as well. And
that's another thing. We don't know if there's going to be a bundle option, if fans are going to be asked to spend $100.
That aspect, like if this is a paper, like that is a tough ask for people, no matter what your lineups are on back-to-back weekends. And granted, there are certainly your fans that will just buy both. But there are plenty, I think, that will choose between the two. Like that's a really tough turnaround, 7 days between pay-per-views, no matter what you have planned for the two.
Yeah. And just to be clear where this is available, it's going to be DirecTV in demand, which basically if you have cable, you probably have it. And ppv.com, which is for international regions, including Canada, UK, Australia, Ireland, I think, and New Zealand, basically the big English language countries. And I have asked Fight, but have not heard back yet. Fight usually carries it internationally. And we don't know about Bleacher Report. Andrew Zarin has previously reported that it will be available in the U.S. digitally on Bleacher Report.
Okay. I wanted to quickly chat about some ratings notes just from the last couple of days. Going back to Saturday, Collision this past weekend with FTR against Adam Cole and MJF did 739,000 viewers and a 0.27 in the 18 to 49 demographic. So viewership was up 20% from the previous week. Demo up 49%. And this was going up against the UFC 291 prelims. I believe there was women's soccer as well that was airing. You have Major League Baseball. And as Brandon has the quarter hours for, I mean, if this was not your confirmation that Adam Cole and MJF are the hot act in the company and a big growth period for those final two quarters where the tag match took place. I know this doesn't eclipse the premiere, but for me, this was the most impressive number that Collision has drawn, not having the advantage of being the first show. I thought this was a great number considering the competition, the growth for your main event, and overall to pull a 0.27 on Saturday night. I think it ups your ability of what you forecast the ceiling to be for a well-promoted edition of Collision.
Yeah, it was definitely the most surprising for it to be that high. I was shocked. Yeah, I guess it speaks to, you look at the quarter hours, that main event did very well. You had CM Punk appearing. That helps. His quarter hour didn't like jump massively, but it did fine, I think. But
do you find now with the quarter, like I know you've always kind of been, you kind of look at the quarter hours, like there's
meticulously coding the conditional formatting. Yes,
you should be. But I think that as we're seeing like with MJF and Adam Cole, we saw with the Judgment Day on Monday, we certainly get that evidence from the Bloodline. Like you are seeing like big changes with these acts that are connecting that the quarter hours correlate to. Like this almost feels like a bygone era where we saw this level of change among quarters based on who was there, because for a long time, like the dips and increases were, nothing you could, I think you had to kind of go out of your way to try and draw conclusions over.
Yeah. My intuition is I completely agree with you that, and I don't know if my ability to analyze them has gotten sharper a little bit in recent months or but I think that's right that, so I've been reporting quarter hours pretty consistently since early 2022 and with AEW quarter hours before that. And I feel like it was a lot of, you can't really distinguish the signal from the noise for the most part. But now there's real acts, like you said, that are emerging as, wow, they really moved a quarter hour. And it's hard to deny that's because of the content.
Are you seeing similar trends with YouTube videos with the same like acts? Is that also standing out to the same degree? Like with Adam Cole and MJF, I guess we have now a month of evidence.
Yeah, I think so. If you look at the last SmackDown, the live promo with Roman Reigns and Jey Uso that opened SmackDown this past Friday was the most watched quarter. I don't have growth because that's the first quarter, but it was the most watched quarter of any of the 8 quarters of SmackDown, and it was by far, at least one of those clips was by far the most viewed YouTube clip. And I think they had a couple more that were number 2 and number 3. So you usually do see consistency with how the YouTube clips of the show do with how the best performing, or what I judge to be the best performing quarter hours are. And it's helpful to have that corroboration.
We also have an interesting story that Mark Raimondi just put out. This coming Saturday, we have the Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz fight that's going to be happening in Dallas, that Logan Paul is hopeful of attending after wrestling Ricochet in Detroit and making it to Dallas that night to corner his brother, which seems very difficult to do. There's a 8 p.m. start time for the main card between Jake Paul and Nate Diaz. So that fight will probably get into the ring around 11:30 midnight. I don't see how Logan Paul can possibly make it to Dallas that night, but we will see what he can pull off. But the interesting part in this article that Mark wrote is that in the lead up to Nate Diaz getting into a boxing fight, WWE entered the mix and they wanted to put together a fight, a real fight between Logan Paul and Nate Diaz. And once WWE got
a WWE show,
they didn't state if it would be on a WWE show or if WWE would be promoting this as a separate event. I would think this is pure
brawl
speculation.
For all rules.
I would think like this very well could have been on SummerSlam, and it would have eliminated competition for SummerSlam on Saturday. Not that the crossover is gigantic, but regardless, they were looking at promoting a fight between them, and WWE, it sounds like, would have been the promoter, and Nate Diaz just soured on this and kind of withdrew himself with WWE getting involved, and it didn't go anywhere.
I wouldn't be surprised to see TKO when that merger is completed. And we didn't really get any hints of a timeline, other than second half of the year. We're in the second half of the year. But I wouldn't be surprised to see TKO get involved in boxing. There was a conference talk, I think one of the last ones before Stephanie left, about, and Nick talking generally about sports and sort of talking about how, boxing is something that they might be interested in. I can't imagine a shoot fight on a W show in this era, right? This is like, I have to think back to like Butterbean and Mike Barton, Bart Gunn.
We're not getting Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler in a
that's not going to be a
real
shoot
fight this coming Saturday. Here's the line. This is from Mark Raimondi's piece that you can read on ESPN.com. So Zach Rosenfield, who is the representative for Nate Diaz, said there was a very interesting and attractive offer on the table for Diaz to fight Logan Paul, but WWE got involved and Diaz soured on the idea. Logan has become a top attraction for the pro wrestling company, and former WWE CEO Stephanie McMahon said at a summit last year that the promotion was interested in getting.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Quote, the WWE came in and then they wanted to take over the whole thing, Diaz told ESPN. And I'm like, I just got out of the UFC. Why am I going to go sign with WWE? I fight for real. I'm not going to be doing a real fight on a WWE card or no funny shit like that. Logan said he heard that was one of Diaz's reasons for not being interested any longer, calling it a weak cop-out.
Yeah. I mean, there's a real branding problem there. I don't know if it's a great idea in this point to try to mix those things. And it's not like the Brawl for All was a success. And it's not like the Butterbean and Bart Gunn fight is thought well of. And I think that's,
and it does speak to the confusion that I think that would create. Like, it sounds like from all indications, this would be a real fight, but if this is a WWE promoted event, it does.
And how's the crowd going to receive that? I mean, is it going to be along the lines of the musical acts that we've seen that people have not responded positively to, or would they get into it because Logan Paul is someone they know?
Yeah, I really don't know how that would go down. If you were to embed it into, say, a SummerSlam event, like here we have 7 wrestling matches and then this in the middle, I do think it would be a weird fit. Like,
it seems like there's a risk of creating ambiguity around, well, maybe some things are a shoot here. And if you're UFC, you definitely don't want that with the company that you're merging with. That definitely, the matches are work. I think it's one of the things we talked about with this merger is you don't, there definitely can be cooperation and a lot of synergy between these two companies, but in terms of on-screen co-promotion, I think that has to be done carefully.
It does, though, inform you of WWE open to this idea for Logan Paul. And I would be very curious if they have any involvement in this Saudi Arabia fight that Logan Paul is involved in October. They obviously had to sign off on it, but do they have some kind of promotional attachment to this card? Like, it is being presented as just a KSI Logan Paul promoted event in October, but you have a company that has Logan Paul under contract. They have the relationships in Saudi Arabia, but to our knowledge, there's no involvement with WWE. But it's something that you wonder if, like, this is okay. This didn't work out with Nate Diaz, but we have this guy under contract, and there's a market for it.
Right. It's something that you could see happening on a Saudi show where a lot of
definitely
weird things happen.
And they're running, like, that Logan Paul show is October 14th. So that's about 3 weeks before WWE's return to Saudi Arabia. So those are happening in pretty close proximity to one another later this year. And the final thing, unless you want to throw in anything else, Brandon, is SummerSlam on Saturday night that myself and Mr. Thurston will be in attendance for. Nick Khan stating over 43,000 tickets sold, and they are on pace for a sellout.
Well, what's a sellout?
Yes. Under their scaling of the stadium, they are on pace for a sellout. They are not going to be filling this stadium.
Well, I think Wrestlenomics has the current setup at well over 50,000. So it's hard to, well, not even well over 50,000. It's as high as 57,000. It's hard to imagine them selling as many tickets as Wrestlenomics has it configured for right now. Not to diminish, it's going to be a huge crowd.
Yeah, Wrestlenomics listing 47,601 tickets distributed. I mean, it's going to be a giant crowd for Saturday. But as Tony Khan has noted, All In is no secondary event to WWE. Did you see this quote that came out today?
No, I did not.
This is the latest involving the wars between Tony Khan and Paul Levesque. So the background here is that on the Cody Rhodes documentary, there was a clip that got circulated of Paul Levesque reflecting on Cody coming to WWE and how he grew up not dreaming about being the face and the champion of a secondary promotion. He wants to be the champion and the face of the WWE. So Tony Khan was asked about this by the Orlando Sentinel and stated, "We certainly won't be the secondary promotion at All In. We're number one in the UK, on TV and with a record gate. I have a lot of respect for Cody. I know those weren't his words, to be fair, but we're not secondary in a lot of markets. We're not secondary in a lot of markets. For the first time in a long time, WWE has been secondary in a lot of markets. I'm proud of where we're at, and we're not taking a backseat to anybody."
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's Tony Khan's response. Anyway. So there you have it. That is all the latest. Anything else that was coming out of the earnings report? Anything else, Brandon, that we haven't touched on?
We have some new Polestar data. We can tell you what the gate was, according to Polestar, what the gate was for Money in the Bank and for the SmackDown the prior night, which have been described by WWE and I believe by Paul Levesque as well as the highest grossing arena event in WWE's history. I would add that that's not adjusting for inflation, but we do have $3.3 million for, that's US, and 2.6 pounds sterling is the foreign currency. $3.3 million for Money in the Bank. And the night before, what has been called the highest grossing SmackDown ever, $1.8 million.
Yeah, we also have the pretty much immediate sellout for Survivor Series at the Allstate Arena. That's the week in Chicago that AEW is running the typical Thanksgiving Eve Dynamite. And then WWE has the Allstate Arena booked Friday for SmackDown and Saturday for Survivor Series. And the fact that Survivor Series was an instant sellout, that's going to be an enormous gate that they are going to have to close out the year.
Yeah, it's good week to, if you want to spend your Thanksgiving in Chicago.
Just watch wrestling every single night of the week in Chicago. Let's go to a few super chats here. Let's go to Jake here, who asks, do we know who now is running WWE talent relations? That's technically still under the purview of Paul Levesque.
Yes, I think that that would be consistent with the press release that was put out about a year ago when Vince resigned, is that he is whoever is.
He wasn't dropping any titles. He was just taking on additional duties.
Whoever might be the the next person down from him, he's overseeing that person. Who would that be? Because Mark Carrano's gone.
Mark Carrano's gone, but William Regal is back. He's probably very much involved. They are doing tryouts this week in Detroit, so I'm certain that they probably have Regal involved with that, and their regular scouting team of such. But I don't, because what's his name is also gone. The person they had hired from the UFC, who was he was running like the PI, and
James Kimball.
James Kimball, yes, he just left under unknown circumstances. Yes, they didn't go. They did not elaborate too much on his departure from the company, but that's the talent relations picture as well. We got a question here asking our thoughts on literally every wrestler under the roster. We always appreciate the super chat, but yeah, we're not going through that whole list. Sorry, Richard. And but thank you for your patronage.
Thank you for the super chat.
We have a very, very busy weekend coming up. The biggest news, though, and I did bury the lead, is that the last time I was on here with Brandon, he was very grim on his hopes in the G1 Climax pool. And ladies and gentlemen, as of this recording, Brandon has jumped up. He is in second place.
I saw
among
this.
the post wrestling grouping. I am not in second place. I am far from it. But Brandon is within striking distance. You might end up winning this entire pool, Brandon.
And do we get points? Do the points end after the regular block matches? And
I believe it only covers
from there.
I think it's only the round robin portion that is covered, which will be wrapping up over this next week. Yes.
Okay.
Are you following any G1?
Or somewhat. I haven't watched much in the last week or two.
Yeah, this morning was not a viewing that I was going to sneak in with everything that was going on. Nor will I probably this weekend, because I'm off to Detroit, as will Brandon. You're getting in on Saturday?
I'm leaving Friday morning.
Oh, so Friday.
I'll be there Friday night.
Okay, great. Well, we will meet up with you. Do you want to go to Game Changer with us?
I wouldn't be opposed. We could negotiate this and have deep conversations offline, perhaps.
Yeah, we could. Brandon and I will be the two people at the back of Harpo's, and we'll be counting heads and then going to the ticket office. We're really fun guys to hang out with at wrestling events, as Brandon can attest to at Forbidden
Yes, we'll be
Door.
taking notes.
Yeah, I'll be quiet. I'll get in my 5 words throughout the 5 hours. All right. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. It was a very busy one. Wei Ting and I are back tonight for Rewinded Dynamite. We'll be live on this channel at 10 p.m. Eastern time, chatting about that. And then over at postwrestlingcafe.com, it's our double header tonight, as we will be jumping on to chat about Bash at the Beach 2000 on Dark Side of the Ring. And then that's a great primer for next week, because in this slot on Pollock and Thurston, the man that everyone demands, David Bixenspan, the author of many great journalistic pieces and a fantastic Paul Heyman impression, he will be joining us to chat about the legal fallout from Bash at the Beach 2000. No one better equipped than David Bixenspan to break down people cutting promos on one another on pay-per-views, what is a character versus a real person, and the years that this case dragged on for, the lineage of WCW that stretched into 2005. So David Bixenspan will be on with us, and we'll chat some of the more noteworthy stories covered on Dark Side of the Ring from the past season. So that is going to be next week. And where can people follow all the latest data, numbers, Polestar information, quarter hours, the go-to place, Brandon?
You can go to Wrestlenomics.com or patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. I have my report on the Vince story and the subpoena and all that is for free for everybody right now on Wrestlenomics.com. And I've also written up a report on the WWE earnings that is up there for subscribers as well. Beginning TV ratings reports are out there, all that stuff at patreon.com/Wrestlenomics.
All right. You can go check out all of that. And we will be speaking with you later on tonight on the post-wrestling side. And Brandon and I are off to Detroit this weekend for SummerSlam coverage. And maybe we'll see a legit fight between Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler. Who knows what will happen? That is it for us. Thank you for tuning in to Pollock